Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, where leaders are empowered to equip and disciple men.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. These podcasts are designed to equip and empower leaders to more effectively minister to the men in their church and community. In this episode, you'll be listening to a talk that David Delk gave at the 2018 Refuel Conference entitled Creating a Culture of Relentless Discipleship. In this talk, David will discuss practical ways to develop a culture in your ministry for discipling men. He reminds us that the culture eats strategy for lunch every day. David was the executive director of Man in the Mirror Ministries for many years, and now is the executive pastor of Grace Church in Greenville, South Carolina. He co-authored the book, Leave No Man Behind, and regularly leads training events for men's leaders. He's married to Ruthie, and they have 2 grown children. Listen now as David speaks on creating a culture of relentless discipleship.
Hi, I'm David Delk, and I'm excited about this opportunity to be with you to talk about men's discipleship. I want to just express my appreciation, first of all, that you would consider being involved in a training like this, because I know it's taking time and effort and energy on your part. But I believe that there's nothing more important and strategic than reaching and discipling men. So I'm very excited about talking to you about creating a culture of relentless discipleship in your church. And I chose that word relentless very intentionally because, many churches, most churches have a culture of sporadic discipleship or occasional discipleship or event-based discipleship or curriculum-based discipleship. But I want to talk to you about how to build a culture of relentless discipleship. And, if you may have heard the phrase that culture trumps strategy. And that is that, another way of saying it is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the idea is that you can come up with programs and initiatives and curriculum and different things that you want men to do. But if all it is a strategy, then all of your energy and all of the momentum is having to come from that ministry initiative. And so guys get really excited. They want to watch the videos. They want to read the books. They want to get in the small groups. They want to go to the event, whatever it is. But as soon as that is over with, then guys are just kind of saying, okay, well, what's next? And you really don't have anything still moving forward. And so instead, if we can create a culture where one man in our church cares enough about another man to want to get involved in his life, to want to help him grow, and we have lots of allies scattered through our church that have that mindset where it's become an expectation in our church that we are going to get involved in the lives of other men, we are going to help them grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. Once that culture gets established, then you can use lots of different tools and lots of different programs and curriculum and initiatives that can help you accomplish the goal of really seeing men discipled in your local church. And so we have at Man in the Mirror a strategy that we talk about as the create, capture, sustain mindset. And so I'm just going to take the next few minutes to sort of walk through that model with you, that mindset a little bit, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you as you think about how do we create that kind of culture of discipleship. And when we talk about our overall strategy, this no man left behind model, the idea is we want to help local churches create an environment in their church where the Holy Spirit inspires men to engage in life and life discipleship. And so we've seen this over and over again as men have applied, as leaders have applied this model, this create, capture, sustain mindset, that more and more men in their church begin to capture, be captured by the vision of reaching and discipling other men. So we hope that you'll find the same thing to be true for you. And so let's talk about that. How do we create this culture of relentless discipleship? Well, the first way we do that is we create momentum with men. Now, many churches already do this in a variety of ways. We have events that guys can come to. We have activities that they can join. We have worship services every Sunday that men are a part of. All of those things create momentum with men. And the reason they do that is that we create value for guys. We give them something that they find valuable. And so when we think about doing that, we need to remember that however we want to get guys connected the most powerful force in getting a man to participate is going to be a personal invitation. It's going to be a relationship. And if we want a culture of relentless discipleship, it's got to be based on the personal initiative of men going after other men. And so if you're planning a barbecue or a retreat or a small group launch or a Saturday morning breakfast or a work day in the community, whatever it is, don't just rely on your marketing to make that happen. Think about how can you get allies who will own the idea of personally inviting eyeball to eyeball, face to face, other men to be a part of that initiative. And that's how we create value with men. The idea is to give men what they need in the context of what they want so that we can get them to move forward. You know, most churches do a pretty good job of creating value. We have lots of ways that guys can get involved. But the next aspect of this mindset is something that many churches fall short in, and that is to capture momentum. So we create value, we get all this interest and excitement, we get everybody all pumped up, and then we just kind of walk away. It's almost like turning the air conditioning on in the middle of the summer and then leaving all your doors and windows open. Nobody would do that, right? It doesn't make any sense. And yet if you go to all the trouble to get 12 or 14 volunteers to put on a wild beast feast and cook a bunch of meat and have all these guys show up, you get 75 or 80 guys show up. And then afterwards everybody's standing around saying, "Oh, that was amazing. Yeah, that was so much fun. Oh yeah, that was great. See you later. All right, see you later." And 2 weeks after the event, nothing's different. It's just like nothing happened. It's not helpful to anybody. And so we want you to always be thinking about, how do I capture the momentum that we create? How do I capture by giving men believable next steps? And so what we like to say is always show men the right next step. Usually it's going to be some kind of short-term, believable opportunity that you can put in front of a man in the context of a relationship. And so we want to, whenever we create value for men by getting them to connect with something, whether that's an event, an activity, a ministry at our church, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we give them a believable next step that they could take in the context of a relationship. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if we were doing that Wild Beast Feast, maybe we have a marriage class on Sunday mornings. And so we would have scattered in the crowd, some of the men who are attending that marriage class. And they would be talking about that with the guys with them. "Hey, I don't know if you've enjoyed tonight, but my wife and I actually go to this class." And then we might have a man give a testimony of what God has done in his marriage because he attended that class. And then we would have an announcement and we would introduce the teacher. We might show a brief video of what the class looked like. The idea being that we would make it so believable for that man who is currently disconnected from our church that it would make so much sense for he and his wife to come to that class on the next Sunday. And if you have 80 guys there, of course you're not going to get 75 new men to show up at a class, but maybe you get 3, or maybe you get 5, or maybe you get 7. And the reality is, if you don't do anything, you're going to get 0. So 3 is better than 0. And if you get 3 from the Wild Beast Feast, and then you get 2 or 3 from the father-son camp out, and you get 4 or 5 from the daddy-daughter dance, and you get 2 or 3 from the family work day in the community where you do the service projects, pretty soon that adds up to a lot of new men being connected into the life of your church. So we want to show men a right next step. We want to give them second gear material. What we mean by that is something that makes sense. If you've ever tried to shift a car from first gear to fourth gear, you know what happens, right? It stalls out. And so we want to give them second gear material, something that's believable, something that's achievable, that they could actually see themselves doing. And then we want to get an on-site commitment. And this is so important because we need to make sure that we're not just letting guys leave and then just wondering about what's going to happen after that. Say, we'll send you an email or look for a sign-up sheet next week or check out the church bulletin or whatever. No, you don't want to do that. Imagine going to a car dealership and you really loved a vehicle. And you were so excited about it and you were intent on it and you were asking the salesman all these questions and you were getting into all the details. And finally he said, "Do you want the car?" And you said, "I do want the car." I think I do. And he said, great, that's awesome. I tell you what, why don't you go on home? I'll talk to my manager, and maybe in a few weeks, we will get you an email, tell you how you could purchase the car. No, right? That's no car salesman in the world is going to work that way. And yet we do that with guys in church all the time. We want to get an on-site commitment from them to take that next step. And we want to make sure that we have those men in the crowd who are personally inviting guys to participate in it with them, right? Because we want it to be based on that relationship, not on programs, not on curriculum, but on relationships of one man caring enough about another man. And then that covers create, and then the next step was capture. And now we're going to talk about sustaining change in this create, capture, sustain mindset. How do we sustain change with men? Well, the first thing I want to point out is that we are not talking about the traditional idea of a men's ministry. The idea of a men's ministry, as we've talked about in the past, is actually kind of unhelpful. Because what we say when we talk about a men's ministry is what the men are doing when they're off by themselves to the side of the church. And you know, that's great. Those are good things to have a men's breakfast or a men's retreat or men's small groups. All those things are helpful. But the reality is there are so many very important things that men are doing in the regular life of our church, both to grow themselves, but also to serve others and to help others grow. So they're leading couple small groups, or they're teaching the 5th grade boys class, or they're working the audiovisual equipment, for a worship service. All these different ways that men are involved. And we ought to be celebrating that, and we ought to be taking advantage of those things as part of our men's discipleship process. As a matter of fact, in most churches, men are being discipled as much or more in the regular ministries of the church than they are through the men's ministries. And so what we want to say is, let's, as a men's leadership team, not restrict ourselves to just thinking about what happens when we get the men off to the side of the church, but instead, let's take advantage of how can we disciple a man while he's serving as an usher, or while he's playing in the praise band, or while he's involved in helping out with the youth group on Wednesday nights. Because all of those are discipleship opportunities for men. And often we find that some of the best discipleship opportunities actually are taking place in these different environments. And so we want to have an all-inclusive mindset that says every interaction our church is having with any man is men's ministry. And it's part of our men's discipleship process. And so when we think about sustaining change, we've created value, we've got a guy moving who is spiritually stagnant, he's taken some kind of step. Then we've captured momentum by, in relationship, offering him a believable next step that he could take. And now we want to sustain change. So what we're going to do is we're going to drive him towards the most effective disciple-making ministries in our church. And it's pretty easy to identify where those are. Just think about some men's lives, some men whose lives have been changed in your church over the last few years. You could sit down with your leadership team and you could brainstorm it. We did this with a group one time where they brainstormed a list of 8 or 10 guys. And we just listed out some of the key things that had happened. Where had they been involved in the church? Well, this one served in the youth group, and this one played in the praise band, and this one was involved with his wife in this certain ministry. And over these 8 or 10 men, we saw a few things that began to emerge. And one of them was a leadership development ministry where they were teaching men how to lead and serve in meeting the needs of people in the community. And so what we recognized was they already had a very effective men's discipleship program. It just happened to be part of their outreach and service ministry of their church. And so rather than thinking about trying to how to create some other ministry that you're going to have to get time and attention and money and volunteers, and you're going to end up distracting your whole church away from the things that are already working, instead, get behind the things that are working and figure out how to get men connected into that. So if you have a dynamic worship pastor who has a huge influence on everybody that's involved in the worship ministry of your church, figure out how to get more men connected to the worship ministry. If you've got a student minister or youth minister who does a great job with his volunteers, casting vision, building into them, meeting with them, praying with them, challenging them, figure out how to get more men to volunteer with the student ministry. Take advantage of where God has already worked working in the life of your church. And when we think about sustaining change, we think about getting men into the regular study of God's Word, and we think about getting them into authentic relationships with other men. The regular study of God's Word, authentic relationships with other men. It's back to relationships. It's back to creating this culture where one man cares enough about another man to go after him and to help him grow in his relationship with Jesus Christ. And so we talk about bridges and bringing as part of this process, that we need some leaders and some men who will create bridges from our ministry. So your church has a softball team. How in the world does a guy who's kind of on the periphery of your church get from playing on the softball team to, say, join in a small group? That's a big leap, right? Probably, most likely, the only way that's going to happen, unless he's in a devastating crisis, the only way that's going to happen is when a man cares enough about him to get involved in his life, to get to know him, and to invite him to become a part of that discipleship process in that small group. It's got to be based on that relationships. We have to build the bridges, and we have to bring men with us as we help move them forward. It all comes down to relationships. We call those men who are willing to go after other men allies. And one of the things you ought to evaluate in your ministry is, are we growing the number of allies? Are we growing the number of men who are passionate about reaching and discipling other men? One of the things I love about this create, capture, sustain mindset is it's so concrete for those allies. One of the issues we have when we try to raise up guys who want to disciple other men is you say, do you want to disciple somebody? And they think, what in the world does that mean? And who am I to disciple somebody? I don't have my act all together. I don't know what to do, right? But when you say to a group of men, a subgroup of your men, hey, we're going to have a barbecue night and we're going to have 35 guys show up, and we expect that maybe 8 or 10 of them are not participating in our groups, and we would like to launch a new group, would you be a part of that? And would you invite some new men to come to that? That is so concrete and that is so specific. It's very easy for a guy to say, sure, I'll give you 6 weeks. I'll invite a guy. I'll come to a group for 6 weeks and see if I can get a new guy to do that. Well, what are you doing? You're showing him what it looks like to disciple somebody. You're showing him how to help a man move forward in his relationship with Christ. So we create value for guys with something that gets them moving spiritually. It could be a one-on-one meeting for breakfast or coffee. It could be an event or activity at the church. We give them a believable next step where we capture the momentum by thinking through what would make sense for this man moving forward, and we offer that to him in the context of a relationship. And then we sustain change by helping that man become a part of the most effective disciple-making ministries in the life of our church. That's the create, capture, sustain mindset. And as you begin to implement that over time, as you find a ministry of activity and you gather some guys and you help them catch a vision for what this mindset could look like, what you'll see is that more and more men will begin to get it. You'll have more and more allies who are not just participating in things because you told them to or because they think this is what good Christian guys do, but they're involved because they really want to see men's lives transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as those allies, the number of allies expand, your ministry is going to be more and more powerful, more and more fruitful, and you will have found that you've created a culture of relentless discipleship. That's what the local church should be about, seeing men's lives transformed for the glory of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.menwithnoregrets.org/podcast.